Welcome back, my name's Tom and we're back talking about F1 Fantasy, and in this video I'll be discussing a few things. First of all, we'll have a quick look at my team in Australia. Second of all, we're going to crack out the first Violin of the season. Third of all, we're going to have a quick look at the big news in the F1 Fantasy community in terms of the price changes. And, exactly how, basically, if anyone doesn't know, there's been a breakthrough. We now know with a high degree of certainty how the prices are being changed by the developers each week. So we can kind of use that to kind of build our budget over the course of the season. That's going to be impactful in terms of team selection. And then we're actually going to talk about the actual team selection, which is the team selection videos. There's a lot going on in this video, so bear with me. Let's just get straight into what happened in Australia. There it is on screen, done. I will only spend a few seconds on this because you can literally see it. This is kind of done. I did move away from the Verstappen 2x build because just Ferrari just looks strong. I feel like this is going forward. I was going to be left behind if I stayed with the other build, and obviously it paid off even better than I could have imagined because Verstappen DNF'd. So obviously. Moving away from Verstappen 2x is a massive impact in my gain here. I think I gained about 100 points from transfers last week, which is phenomenal. So yeah, pretty happy with very happy actually, in fact. Used a no negative chip as well. I talked myself into that pretty much on stream. Just convinced myself that Australia was a dangerous track, and I think just forevermore I'm just going to keep using my no negative chip in Australia. But as it turned out, there weren't actually that many DNFs in terms of like crashes and stuff. Watching this race historically, there's been quite a few crashes, and the F2 races around the weekend, there was quite a few people going off and crashing. So it made me just really kind of like, let's just use a no negative. I used it here last year. Didn't get any points for it, but this year gave me 20 points because Verstappen DNF'd. So the Red Bull Racing, most people were sat here with just 32 points. You can see that they're not classified here for Verstappen has been crossed out because I used a no negative. So yeah, save myself 20 points. That's absolutely fine by me. Obviously not up to optimal, and we want to be mathematically optimal in a mathematics game effectively. But sometimes you've got to follow your gut, and that's what I did. So it paid off to some extent anyway. So yeah, pretty happy with that. Job done. Obviously, like I say, the converse of that is anyone that didn't move away from the Verstappen 2x, and the first Violin of the season goes to my friend Keith, who's in my private league along with my brother, and they both actually still have Verstappen as the 2x, and 74 points. I'm sorry to drop you in this, Keith, as the first Violin of the season, but this is kind of not just directed at you, it's more like everyone who went with Verstappen. There will be a lot of people hurting this week, so this is a kind of moment of reflection for our fallen comrades in terms of a terrible haul of points. So moment of silence, please. Okay, right. That's that for out the way. I'll just flick this over to my team going forward, and then we'll also have a quick look before we go into the deep dive into team selection, because it is a bit of a headache. It is a bit of a headache for me, and we'll get into that in a minute. Let's have a quick look though at this price change news, which is actually big news in the community. So let's bring this over here. Hopefully everyone can see this okay. If I zoom in a little bit more, hopefully that's all good. So what's happened? A user on the F1 Fantasy Tools Discord called Max Alive has cracked the formula. So now we know with pretty much like 99% certainty how the developers are tweaking budgets according to driver and constructor performance each week. And this is a snippet that I've taken from the spreadsheet that Max Alive shared on the F1 Fantasy Tools Discord. So thank you very much for that. All credit goes to Max Alive and F1 Fantasy Tools. I'm literally just pinching this from them. So yeah, go check them out. F1 Fantasy Tools, great website. Max Alive, don't know who you are, but thank you. And this is basically, I'm just going to use his exact example just to go through anyone who doesn't know how it works, and then I'll discuss how this might impact my thinking in terms of team selection, because it will impact my thinking. So let's try and decipher some of this. So it's very simple, actually. It's very simple. But obviously, this has been like worked out and reverse engineered by this guy Max Alive. So yeah, it's a great piece of work that you've worked this out. So how it works is the drivers are split into these three tiers, known here as Tier C, Tier B, Tier A. So everyone below 15 million, which is pretty much anyone below Alonso, so Stroll and downwards, they are in this Tier C. Tier B is everyone from Fernando Alonso up to Perez in that 15 to 25 million budget. And then Tier A is Max Verstappen all by himself, as well as the Red Bull constructor. They're the only actual candidates for Tier A. And how it works is, if we can just sort of go straight to the example. Well, yeah, we'll go straight to the example. So how it works is, for a driver, for example, we've got Russell here given an example. In Bahrain, he scored 20 points. You divide that number, the points scored by the driver or the constructor, divide that by the average scored across the entire grid. So you obviously add up all the scores, the fantasy scores for each driver on the grid, divide that by 20, because there's 20 drivers on the grid, and that gives you an average number of points scored. So in Bahrain, that's 12.1. So you take 20 divided by 12.1, that gives you this, what's known here as the normalized points. You can call it whatever you want. It's like a ratio or a percentage, a number, it doesn't really matter as long as it fits into the table up here, which it does. So anyway, that simple calculation, 20 divided by the average points, gives you 1.6. And 1.6 here on this left column here, 1.6 falls into this little range of numbers, 1.56 to 3.1. And because Russell is priced, I can't remember the exact price, is roughly 19 million. That means he falls into the B tier. So you go to the B tier column here, work your way down, and you hit 0.3. So because his number was 1.6, he's a B tier driver, he goes up by 0.3, and that's exactly what happened in Bahrain. The other example given here is Haas. They scored 20 points in Australia, race just gone. The average points per constructor was 25.8. So they actually scored fewer than the average. However, because they're in this C tier, their normalized points of 0.7, we can find 0.7, which falls into this category here, 0.5 to 1.5. So they're 0.7 as a C tier. That means they go up by 0.5, which, as we can see, they did. Obviously, if, for example, if the Red Bulls scored that normalized points, if Red Bulls only scored 20 points and their normalized points was 0.7, they would fall into this category here where they just don't move, which is actually pretty much where I think they finished. They scored like 30 points, so it probably is what one point. I guess yeah, they finished it. They did actually finish in this category about 1.2 or whatever it is. I can't bother to work out the maths off the top of my head. But anyway, that's exactly what happened. They didn't actually move at all. Didn't go up, didn't go down. And this is exactly how it works. And credit again to F1 Fantasy Tools. They went back through 2023 results and they looked at the races so far in 2024, and this works every single time. Admittedly, there are a couple of weird little anomalies. I think one of them being like Sargent when he didn't drop when he should have dropped, but that's because we think that the basement price is like 3.5 million and you can't actually go below that. And there's a couple of other weird anomalies, but we think there might be errors from the developers as opposed to anything else. So I can say with a high degree of certainty this is correct, and obviously this news is pretty big and it's kind of spreading through Twitter and everything, and it would be quite funny if the F1 fantasy developers actually saw this and like, quick, change the formula, and they change it again. It's completely random next week. It'll be quite funny actually, but either way, F1 Fantasy Tools are going to be implementing this into their website so we get a better idea of potential budget changes as well as live budget changes in the race, which is pretty cool. So that's been a bit of a whirlwind explanation, but the bottom line is basically each of the drivers are going to split, like I say, into these three categories, A, B, and C. It's the same as the constructors. And according to how well you do against the average points scored that week, you just look at the table here, and that's how much you go up or down by, which fully explains as well the weird scenario where we had Gasly score 6 points in Bahrain, Ocon score 7 points in Bahrain, Ocon went up 0.5, and just Gasly went down 0.1, which was just like, what? But there's only 1 point difference. How does it work? Well, it's because Gasly was on just the wrong side of this 0.5 number, whereas Ocon was just above the 0.5 because of that 1 point difference. So that's why you see here as a C tier driver, Ocon went up 0.5 and Gasly went down 0.1. That kind of explains that weird thing that happened back in Bahrain. So yeah, that's kind of it in terms of, I mean, they can go into a bit more. Oops, I just flashed up. Sorry, bringing back the violin too soon. Let's just get rid of this actually. So that's kind of a very whirlwind of how it works. And now we need to think about how that's going to affect our team selection, because it does affect our team selection to a certain extent. Obviously, it's not going to be dramatic and change everything, and we must make budget gains as much as possible. It is important to gain budget. But how it's going to affect me this week, it could be something as simple as bringing in Perez for Leclerc. Obviously, that means I'd have to change, and if I was going to change, I'd bring in Perez, and we go down to... If I can even see, 6.9. I actually thought I had more money than that. I'd have to go down to like a Sauber or something to do something like that. That's a bit annoying if I want to get Perez in that case. So maybe I'll think twice about it. But anyway, the point is, with this new knowledge of how the prices change, Sergio Perez coming at 22.4 should give us confidence, because he's nowhere near that 25 million cutoff for where they goes into tier A. So if he has a good race when he scores, 30 plus points, as long as that's above the cutoff in terms of that table that we just saw, then he should go up easily 500,000 or 1 million. I was thinking and going into Australia, I kind of want to look at Leclerc or Sainz because they're a bit cheaper and therefore more likely to go up in price, which they did, but ultimately that's because they scored more points anyway than Perez in Australia. But because we now know with a pretty good certainty that Perez, as long as he does well, is going to go up that 0.5, or maybe is it 0.5? I've got rid of it now. Whatever it is, 0.5 or up to 1 million. That's 0.3, isn't it? It's literally gone up 0.3. It's on my screen. 0.3 or 1 million. So that can say, in terms of making budget, it makes me think that Perez is actually a fine option, and that shouldn't be a deciding factor between Perez, Leclerc, or Sainz, and it should be purely based on performance. Because until they get close to that 25 million, then the budget concern just isn't really a concern. However, I'm not sure if I even want to go down the road of the Perez Leclerc Sainz thing, because I do have the option. It is a bit drastic in terms of what I need to do, because it does require me having to take a -10 or use my wildcard, but I can actually just about afford by bringing in Logan Sargent and keeping hold of Albon. So this would be require a -10 or a wildcard, but I can go with a team like this. Or I could also, if I'm going to wildcard, would probably swap out Albon for a Hülkenberg, so I've got some Haas coverage. So I could wildcard or take a -20 or whatever to get to a team like this. I can now afford kind of the dream of Max Verstappen with Red Bull and Ferrari. And this has been hot debate in terms of a post I put up on YouTube, the community tab, and lots of people, thank you very much for getting involved, have kind of been commenting on that and giving their thoughts and opinions on that. There's lots of discussion going on over on X, Twitter, as to whether, if you can afford this, you should go for this. But obviously we've just had a big discussion about budget, and the more I thought, okay, slow down, Tom, slow down. Initially, when I realised I could afford Verstappen with these two constructors, I was like, oh my god, I need to do it. We'll just look at the first couple of practice sessions, it will all be fine. We're going to get in there. And it's not, as many of people have said to me on Twitter or on my comments, in my YouTube comments last week or so, it's a no-brainer. No-brainer is like the two words which I think I need to mute on Twitter. No-brainer. Max Verstappen with Red Bull and Ferrari. Cue all the comments down below. No-brainer. But the more I think about it, the more I think actually, I just don't know if it's correct. I mean, yes, I can afford it, and maybe I won't be able to afford it next week if I wait. And that did happen to me. I paid the price last year doing that, where I had the opportunity for the triple Red Bull, triple McLaren build, and I didn't go with it. And then the next race I was priced out of it, and it took me a few races to get back to it. However, now we know what's going on with these budgets. We can say with a high degree of confidence that the likes of Max Verstappen, even if Verstappen has a great race, because he's in that A tier category, he's only going to go up 0.2 even if he has a stonking race. So he's still going to be pretty affordable. In fact, if he can only go up maximum 0.2, then he can. Then I'm literally safe in this cost cap by 0.3. So it should be fine, providing I don't get screwed over, I guess, by the budget drivers. So I should be able to afford him next week regardless. I suppose as long as whoever I have in his place, for example, maybe if I stick with Leclerc, for example, if he has a DNF and he goes down, he'll go down 0.5 or whatever. I can't remember all the numbers off the top of my head. I had to look at the table, but anyway, so I might get priced out of it that way, and that is some consideration for going for the Max Verstappen build. But like I said, we've just seen how we can, really improve our budget in terms of, and I do think that building budget is very important, and a team that kind of looks more like this, particularly with Lance Stroll in there. I think Lance Stroll is one of those candidates. He's in the C tier. He's in the C tier of this budget building extravaganza, and he's the likeliest out of all the guys down here in the budget region to actually be able to score enough points to push himself up quite comfortably. He should be comfortably scoring. Going up 0.5 in value. He's in that C tier, and in the C tier all you need to do is score half the average points. And if the average points each race are like 10, 11, 12 or something, then as long as Stroll scores like 5 or 6 points in the race, then he should be going up 0.5. I mean, it's just kind of gold dust. It's like a little Lance Stroll gold mine. It's like get Stroll with his little pickaxe, like chipping away, mining gold for our teams. So moving off him, so I can get pounce straight on the Max Verstappen build of the Red Bull and Ferraris. As much as that's appealing, the more I think about it, I feel like building budget might actually be better for a couple of reasons, not just in the short term, but also in the long term. If I go with the Max Verstappen build, let's just shove it in straight away. I mean, I've already shown you kind of what it looks like as an example. Put him in there, and then I can literally afford the dregs down the bottom here. So the problem is with my budget, I can only afford these really cheap rubbish assets. You know, the Saubers, who are having these terrible pit stops, as well as not particularly exciting race pace. You got Sargent, who we still really just don't trust after his terrible season in terms of fantasy last year, multiple -20s. Don't want him on my team if I can avoid it. And then Albon, who's had a really unexciting 10 points to the season so far. It's just not really quite working for Williams. As it stands, it looks like both Logan and Alex will be racing in Japan, but you know, the Williams debacle of Australia where Sargent had to step out and Albon took his car, like, that's still a possibility of happening in Japan, even though news coming out today sounds like it might not actually be the case. But still, that's still a concern, that one of your drivers might not even race. So in terms of building budget though, this team here, I mean, in terms of points, like having Verstappen in there issue 2 times looks great, and it's probably score you a good amount of points, but building budget, it's gonna be terrible. I'm going to be very stagnant. If I jump on this straight away, my budget is going to be very, very stagnant. It's not going to move at all. In fact, if anything, it might actually go down, because these drivers here, Sargent, Bottas, Zhou and Albon, are all likely to drop down because they're just struggling a lot and they can't quite hit that threshold to go up by 0.5. Whereas people like Stroll and the Hazes, for example, maybe even the Alpine to some extent, or a Sonoda or something, are much more likely and on form to kind of go up by that 0.5, or on a really good race go up by 1 million like we saw from Lance Stroll. So if we just hop it back again, go back to my original team here, sticking with a team very similar to this, very much like this, potentially even just like dropping Albon, just getting away from the Williams entirely, and if I can even find Hulkenberg kind of going in with the Hazes and just roll in a transfer over, so I've got 3 going into the sprint race in China, might be quite a sensible thing. And you know, build a budget of this before going into the Verstappen build, because I think building budget is going to be important, because I just don't want to be stuck with the absolute dregs of budget. When I move to that Verstappen build, I'd much rather have a bit more flexibility, have slightly better budget drivers. And it's not just that reason, it's also the possibility of the likes of McLaren's coming into form. You know, McLaren's are expensive. You compare that to Ferraris, they're an extra 3 million. 3 million is quite a lot of money when we're like scratching around with these budget drivers. A lot of the time we're hitting the cost gap, or we're, as you can see on this particular team, we're 0.7 off. I can't just magic up 3 million from somewhere. However, if I was to go over a team like this and hopefully get a bit more budget in terms of Lance Stroll, the Ferrari assets, kind of building that budget, then when I'm ready to move down the line, perhaps to a Verstappen build, I might also be able to afford McLaren, because I do think that there's so much talk about McLaren, and I do think they're going in a very positive direction. And with their upgrades kind of coming fairly soon, I don't know when exactly, but of how successful they were last season, and we saw the race pace in Australia was really good and really, really close to the Ferraris. I think that with an upgrade or two, the McLarens could suddenly become the new template, just like that, like overnight. They turn up with an upgrade, practice sessions, whatever, they storm it, and suddenly we all want McLaren to replace the Ferraris. But oh no, I went with Verstappen early on, didn't build any budget, and now I'm just completely priced out to get the McLarens, and I have to kind of settle for the third best team, Ferrari. So I am looking obviously quite far ahead. This could be several races down the road, but like I say, that 3 million gap at the moment between Ferrari and McLaren is potentially something that needs to be bridged down the line. And McLaren are just kind of on my radar for future team selection. I think they're too expensive for what they are at the moment, but if they jump into that kind of second best team, or at least at certain, maybe perhaps at certain tracks where you want to kind of switch between Ferrari and McLaren according to how they're set up and how well they're suited for the track, then I would like that flexibility. However, there's still kind of that thing like, well, you know, not everyone has the opportunity to go to the Max Verstappen Red Bull Ferrari build, and I have got that opportunity, so maybe I should just use it and kind of forget about what's going to happen in a few races time, because maybe everything's going to change in a few races time anyway, and the Verstappen Red Bull Ferrari build isn't optimal anymore, but at the moment it is, so maybe I should jump on it. It's very, very fine line between building budget and also gaining the points. It's very, very fine line. I don't think there's particularly a right or wrong answer, and it's really open for debate, which is why I'm really in an inner turmoil throughout this last few days as to what I'm actually going to do. I'd be very interested to know your guys' thoughts on it. because that's kind of where I'm at the moment in terms of team selection for Japan. It's pretty much stay with a team. Let's just hop it back to exactly what my current team is. This is my current team with 2 free transfers. I would like to potentially have that kind of 3 transfers going into China sprint weekend. I think it's back-to-back sprint weekends if I'm not mistaken. So having 3 subs kind of to to change the team around if required would be pretty useful, and also building budget. So sticking with a team like this more or less, saving that extra transfer could well be a good thing. However, just going with Max Verstappen 2 times, going forward, I can't imagine he's going to DNF again. It was, something that's completely out of his control. It wasn't like he crashed his car or anything. In terms of reliability, the Red Bulls have been fantastic. And also in terms of race pace, a lot's been said about Perez only finishing 5th in Australia, but he was carrying damage, so I'm not fussed about that. I think the Red Bulls are still going to be very, very strong going around Japan. They've been good here the last few seasons. Verstappen himself has had a phenomenal record around Japan, and maybe just going with him as the 2 times, just forgetting about the budget drivers, just like ignoring them. Hope they don't DNF. Maybe they drop by 0.1 or whatever. And the budget is kind of a bit painful in that respect. Whereas everyone else, anyone that can't afford it are going to be sat on a Perez, a Sainz, or a Leclerc 2 times, who are likely to go up this kind of 0.3 or even a million if they do well. And I'm going to be sat there on Verstappen, who's going to go up like 0.1, 0.2 or something stupid. So in terms of budget, it feels bad to jump on the Verstappen bill, but I just really don't know. Luckily for me, as of the time of the recording, I've still got a week to decide, and we've still got the practice sessions to come as well. And more news will come out, and I can make a bit more an informed decision. But that's kind of where my head's at the moment. Kind of a bit torn between the 2. If you're in my boots, what would you do? Would you jump on the Max Verstappen? Is it a no-brainer? Or would you be more interested in building budget? I do think that building budget could very well be prudent down the line. But, it could be it's short-term outlook versus long-term outlook, trying to find that balance. Because obviously we want to maximise points as much as we can, but you've got to look ahead as well. So I'd be curious to know what you guys are thinking. That's kind of it for me for now. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll catch you again soon. Thanks very much.